Wayne Rooney to, almost every Brazilian selected.
Right.
And actually, there's an article on ESPN.com today that is basically there's an all-star team of people who haven't even been selected by their own countries to go to the World Cup.
Jeez.
Huge story today that Theo Walcott, a very promising young English player, was not selected to go. It's loaded, and that's, as you and I have spoken about in the past, it's because, soccer in the 1970s was a professional sport, but it wasn't really professional in the way it was run, the way it was coached, or the way that the leagues were organized. And soccer has just professionalized more and more. I don't think any sport has benefited more from advanced training techniques, better pitches, better coaching, the sort of international flow of players than soccer. It's made a sport that really was pretty tough to watch in the 1970s, even for people who loved it. It's made it pretty incredible.
Hey, what are the odds that this is Messi's breakout, almost like Maradona in '86? Pele somewhere in the 60s. I can't remember what cup. But do you see him on that level?
Yes. Messi is the best player in the world today.
Hands down.
Hands down. And I think you wouldn't find many people who, really follow soccer and really, can be somewhat objective about it, who would argue with anybody about that.
And there's been other best players. I think the difference with him and the quality that he has that we only see really once a generation is there's a little bit magic. There's a magicalness to him. Or I guess since I'm a writer, I should just call it a magic.
Yeah, magicalness.
Magicalness. That was great. I don't know where that came from.
Cool. I'm going to use that. Do you mind if I use that throughout the World Cup to describe Lionel Messi?
Sure, call it magicalness. I had bad coffee today. My wife made the coffee today and it wasn't good. I'm a little off. There's a magic to him, though, that I have not seen since the mid-'80s.
And also he's a player who seems to sort of pull it out in big games. And that is something that every American sports fan can really sort of relate to. He's a big game player. Put him on worldwide television in a Champions League, quarter or semifinal. Put him in a huge Argentina game, and he seems to figure a way to play really well.
But here's the catch. Even though he is the best player, and everybody who watches soccer agrees, people do not think Argentina can win the World Cup.
Well, here's the thing. Number one, is that anybody who tells you that they know who can win the World Cup and who can't pretty much doesn't know what they're talking about. It is an unpredictable tournament by its nature.
Yeah.
Single game elimination. These aren't best of 7 series. They are, past the group stages. It's just one game, one red card, one bad refereeing decision, one lucky goal, one deflection, and you're out. So the World Cup is incredibly difficult to predict. And I think that Argentina are probably the second best. Look, only teams from South America or Europe have ever won the World Cup. Argentina are probably, behind Brazil, the second best team in South America right now.
Yeah.
And so they've got to stand a pretty good chance.
But everybody's worried about the coach, who ironically is
Maradona.
Yeah. Is it Maradona or Maradona?
I say Maradona.
But some people do say Maradona, right?
But in England we say pasta instead of pasta, so I wouldn't trust me on that.
I'm terrible with pronunciation, so whatever I say is probably wrong. But people are they think he's a little sketchy.
Well, I think he's behaved erratically on the sideline and in the press. But it's tough. He was, however, at a World Cup, and Maradona has never taken Argentina to a World Cup before. At a World Cup, Maradona is somebody who uniquely knows what it's like to go and do that, what it's like to go and play in the pressure cooker of that situation. And I'm not sure that he will be, I think that there are going to be more interesting and colorful characters on the sidelines than even Maradona at the World Cup. And I'm not sure how much difference. There was a article about these trumpets. I believe they're called the Venezuelas, which are the trumpets that the South African fans blow constantly throughout every game.
Yeah.
I don't believe that any players are going to be able to hear what their coach is actually saying from the sidelines during the World Cup. So I'm not sure how much difference it's really going to make.
Well, that was my next question, because you are a Orlando Magic fan, and you were probably going crazy that J.J. Redick was not playing over the putrid Vince Carter. The basketball coach can really affect the series negatively. Can a soccer coach ultimately have that much of an effect on a World Cup?
I think that it is overstated. I think it's overstated.
And why?
Because, really so many decisions have to be made on the field, and there are no timeouts. The flow of play is constant. And, these players are incredibly experienced, and they play. I think coaches of club teams can have an amazing effect. But let's look at England. England have played. This is one of the, contenders for the World Cup. Not the best team in Europe, but one of the contenders for the World Cup. They have played 3 games all year in preparation for the World Cup, and that's it. They played 3 games. So how much time has Fabio Capello really had to sort of, learn and those players and work with them and really influence them? It's really what goes on it's how the players are developed at their clubs, which really, their club teams, that really is most going to affect, who wins and who loses.
I had a thing in my mailbag. I love the topic of what if we raised Americans to become soccer players, almost like we raise cows to do certain things or whatever. If we just geared our best athletes towards soccer.
I love it. It's the Bill Simmons, these are not our best athletes argument.
I love it. It's one of my favorites.
I enjoy it. It's vintage.
And, as I've come to follow soccer this past year especially, and noticing the type of guys who succeed, it really does seem like the smaller, more powerful, explosive guys are the right type of guys. And somehow I missed this in the mailbag. I was saying, man, it's, if we had, you look at the 2 best guys in the world right now are Messi, and I think Wayne Rooney's second, even though he's hurt right now. He's 5'10", Messi's 5'7". I was like, I think Iverson was the perfect test case for, if this guy had been playing soccer since day one, this guy would have been unbelievable, but we don't really have somebody like that now. And some readers pointed out last weekend, we actually do have somebody like that, Nate Robinson, on your beloved Boston Celtics.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, Nate Robinson. He's like everything I kind of described in that mailbag, like 5'7", explosive, plays with an arrogance, unbelievable athletic ability. Nate Robinson is a soccer player. Would that have revised soccer as we know it?
You know what? You've just given me a great idea for a piece. I'm definitely going to do I'm going to figure out if our best athletes were playing, who would actually be in the U.S. squad. And I love the idea of Nate Robinson in a sort of Jermaine Defoe role. Playing off Wayne Rooney. Look, I think that's true. But are you telling me that you don't think that LeBron, the kind of athlete he could have been, couldn't have been an incredible soccer player?
Yeah. How about Dwight Howard?
Also could have been as well. But I'm not sure. I think that environment ends up in the way that environment in some ways also creates basketball players.
Yeah.
Whether that environment is French Lick, Indiana, or the Brooklyn, Coney Island, the sort of, the city courts over there. It's you look at a guy like Clint Dempsey. It's no mistake. No accident that Clint Dempsey is, one of the American team have 2, for me, great outfield players. They've got Landon Donovan and Clint Dempsey. Clint Dempsey, raised in Texas, grew up in a trailer park, played soccer, on the street, in the dirt, with the local Mexican kids, and that's how he learned to play soccer. And so there's a little bit of street in all of these soccer players who get really good.
Yeah, and I think Wayne Rooney is the best example of that, right?
Yeah, he's from the projects in Liverpool. That's where he comes from, and that's why he ends up being there. Steven Gerrard, sort of a similar background. Most of these players come from fairly working class backgrounds where they grew up playing on the street. I think that's actually something which is passing with this current generation of players. I'm not sure that the next generation of players are going to have that so much because they get talent spotted so young and sent off to the clubs.
And that's been our biggest problem in America, is that it's been really hard to get the lower middle class and the lower class on soccer fields, and the people that end up playing soccer for the most part are kids that have had maybe more advantages than somebody like Clint Dempsey had.
Yeah, no, definitely, and more middle class kids. Landon, though, Donovan comes across a different way. Grew up in Ontario, California, and ends up, I just was reading the other day that at the age of, I think, 6, he played on his first league game and scored 7 goals in his first junior team, and he came up playing youth soccer all the way through, a very conventional American upbringing in soccer, but still, he proved with his loan spell at Everton this year that he really is one of the best players out there. But what? Back to the original thing. I'm now starting to picture my American team, like Dwight Howard, at at center forward. Like, if you could just teach him to head the ball.
Right.
If he could head the ball with the with the same lack of feel as his right-handed hook shot, I honestly believe that he could, with that kind of power, he could break nets.
Well, wouldn't the way to do it? Wouldn't you want to pick your dream soccer team of guys, and then take what each guy is, what their physical thing is, and translate it into an NBA player? Like, that's what I did with Messi, because clearly he's the best guy right now, and he's 5'7", and it does seem like these shorter guys just have a way of controlling the ball better. People bounce off them, all that stuff, which is why I always thought Iverson would have been just incredible.
You need a mix, though. I mean, it's amazing. Like, one World Cup stat, which is like, every time I hear it, I become blown away by it again, is that 11 of the 13 last World Cups, either Brazil or Germany has made the final.
Wow.
And Brazil are always the best in the world of football, but Germany get to the final, it seems, or win it, even in years when they're not incredibly dominant, because they are big and really physical. And never forget that you need on your team, you need a spine between goalkeeper through central defense, in central midfield, and up front. You often need a spine of really hard physical people. They don't need to be 6'4", but they've got to be able to, like, really play physical and win the ball in the air a lot.
Well, wouldn't you say for a midfielder? Well, first of all, Rondo has to be in this team, so what position would he be?
Yeah.
He's just athletically, he's got to be.
Talking about Boston Celtics.
No, but athletically, Rondo has to be on this team somewhere. He's one of the most, freakish athletes.
Rondo would have to play in midfield, and he'd have to play in that sort of ball distribution world. Although I have a feeling that Rondo would be a good tackler as well.
Really?
It's that same kind of mentality as stealing.
And Kobe,
he's got that look in his eyes.
Kobe, I think, also has to be in this team just because he's so freaking competitive. If he had geared that towards soccer, I think he ends up being one of the best.
Yeah, Kobe's a striker. He's like, he needs the ball. He needs the ball. He's got to be like, it's the most selfish position in soccer is striker. He's just got to be a striker.
See, I would have said he would be the Defoe. Because Defoe was probably the most selfish player that I watched this year. He's just always going to go for his own.
Defoe needs a lot of chances, though. He definitely needs a lot of shots.
Yeah.
To affect the game.
And what about Nash?
What about?
Like, what position do you see Steve Nash? Because he's got to be on this team, too.
Nash. Well, Steve Nash is probably like somebody who could probably make the Canadian soccer team. Steve Nash is probably sort of like he feels like he's going to be like a left-sided midfielder somehow, like unconventional, plays with his right foot but plays on the left side of midfield. Kind of a Joe Cole kind of a player I see Steve Nash as being.
And who's your stopper? Because I had Darren Williams.
Not Rashid. No.
I don't want Rashid on the team.
I love Rashid would be so intimidating in central defense, though, with his tats. I tell you, who do I like as a stopper? See, the best stoppers in football tend to be kind of like, you know what, weirdly, this is going to be funny, bizarre, and I'm going a little bit sort of back, but I would say like a Darrell Armstrong kind of player. Who's like a more modern kind of Darrell Armstrong? Those guys, like, there's a, there's been a number of like really fantastic central midfielders like Diarra, the French guy who's injured right now. They're kind of little and wiry, but they just patrol in front of the front four and they go and like do that really well.
Oh, so you're talking like a Lindsey Hunter type?
Yes, you need someone just like quick and small who'll like just go in bloodthirsty for the tackle every single time.
Gotcha. You brought up England before. Is it fair to say that the cards just do not seem like they are aligned for this England? Like, it just seems like one thing after another has gone wrong with how they're heading into this cup.
What, for the last 44 years?
Well, besides that, I'm talking about recently, the John Terry thing. That was a little weird.
Well, that's a fantastic story. I mean, also by American standards, it is so tame that here is the captain of the England soccer team who had sex with the ex-girlfriend of one of his teammates, and then leads to him losing the captaincy of England, and the player, who he sort of upset, whose ex-girlfriend he had sex with, actually decided to withdraw himself from consideration for the England team.
Which was weird.
And also today, that's going to affect, he would have made the team instead of a guy who's only ever played 8 minutes of football for England. He happened to play a position, left back, which nobody else was really ready to step into. Really weird. But I think that was, happened earlier in the season, though, not too late. Rooney's had some injuries.
Well, Rooney's Rooney's hurt. Rooney's not healthy yet.
Well, I think that he said in the press this week that he thinks he is, but and he actually looked pretty good in the friendlies. But he's definitely not. Look, he's just played a 60-game season, and these aren't sort of 60-game. This isn't. I know the NBA season is significantly longer and the baseball season is significantly longer, but in soccer, those are 90-minute continuous non-stop games, and these players do arrive at the World Cup incredibly tired.
And I know Beckham's not one of the top guys on England's team anymore, but I still think he probably would have made it, and not to have him and the veteran experience, that can't help.
Beckham would have created goals at the World Cup for England. He always does.
Right. So you don't have him.
You don't have him, and yet the England squad, probably the best team that England, in terms of like international pedigree, the best team that England have sent to the World Cup since 1970.
Didn't you make the finals in '98 though?
What, did England make the finals?
Yeah.
They made the World Cup finals, but not the final. No, England made the quarters in 2002 and the quarters in 2006. And they made the semis in 1990 with a good team, but probably not a team that, like, all the way down the list had as much strength as this team. I mean, you've got guys who play for some of the best teams in Europe, and that really isn't, between, your Manchester United, Chelsea, Liverpool, and I'll give it to you, Tottenham contingent.
Yes.
You've got some very good players who play on very good teams.
It is kind of weird. It's, when you think, like, with the Olympic team, when we throw all our NBA guys together, and it seems like those guys, they have, like, a weird friendship outside of the circles. It's not like it was in the old days where the guys hate each other and they have to learn how to get along. It seems like all these guys get along in the NBA. In England, though, with the Premier League, and you have these heated rivalries that are so much more heated than what we have in America. Is it strange to have all these guys then suddenly playing together every 4 years?
I think that it's, something that, you've so much grown up with, of seeing people do this, and even the players themselves know that players who when they've been fans, like, Rooney grew up, supporting, Everton, and players probably who played for Liverpool, who played for England, he hated. He was used to screaming at them on the television, but when they played for England, he was cheering for them. So I think you get culturally, used to it from growing up watching a club team and watching England. But I think that, the more interesting thing about this is that, their principal identity as players is with their clubs. It's not with their national team. And I think what this leads to is for lots of, the more casual sports fan to really understand about the World Cup is that this is not the best soccer in the world. It's the best soccer tournament in the world, but the standard of soccer at the World Cup is nowhere near the standard of soccer that these guys are playing with in their club teams. They don't train enough with each other. They don't know each other's games well enough. They're not, it's the end of a long season. They're thousands of miles away in South Africa with, the various sort of transportation and hotel issues. The pitches won't be as high quality week in, week out. There are just lots of things that make it less good football, and yet it's such a fantastic event.
So it's the most dramatic.
It's the most dramatic. And there is that sort of, single elimination, so anything can happen. And pedigree is important. England have great pedigree. Brazil have incredible pedigree. They always do. Spain have great pedigree. Argentina have great pedigree. Germany always have great pedigree. But just because those are the 5 teams with the greatest pedigree, it doesn't mean that they have form. And it doesn't mean that they have luck. And form and luck can often make more difference than pedigree in a World Cup.
Champions League is where we want to go for the best possible caliber of soccer, correct?
Best soccer is in the Champions League and in the Premier League, in Serie A in Italy and in Spain. That is where the best soccer is played.
Nash said this too. Nash said that we were talking about the Cup, and he loves the Cup, obviously, but saying, like, this, from a quality standpoint, it's the Champions League. Is the one that if you're a soccer fan, that's the one you have to watch for, just to see these guys at their absolute best. Which I thought was interesting.
It's going to be interesting to see if Ben Gordon, now he's been selected for the English basketball team, whether Ben Gordon is going to passionately follow England in the World Cup.
I think he should have to go to South Africa now.
Yeah, I know. That might change his mind pretty quickly.
So you're thinking It sounds like you're gravitated toward Brazil and Germany.
You know what? As a betting man, Brazil. This is where I see it. Betting man, Brazil or Germany. The team I've seen play the best soccer over the last 4 years is Spain. The team with the best player, another Bill Simmons vintage line, is the team with the best player tends to win, is Argentina.
But you said that's not true, though. You said in soccer that doesn't translate.
You know what? But in certain games it will. Like one player, if I never got to whether I agreed or disagreed with the opening statement. But if Messi has a Maradona-like tournament from 1986, Argentina will win. Because Maradona dominated that World Cup.
But he could, though. Yeah.
And he could. One player could do it. If he has that good a tournament, he could do it. My outside bet for take an outside bet would be the Ivory Coast. As I said, no non-European, non-South American team has ever won the World Cup. This World Cup, though, World Cups do tend to be won by a nation from the host continent. Ivory Coast are not actually the best team in Africa. It's probably Egypt, but Egypt didn't qualify for the World Cup. And the Ivory Coast is packed with players who play with some of the best club teams in Europe. Didier Drogba, Kolo Touré, and on and on and on.
Well,
so Ivory Coast is sort of would be interesting to watch.
Wait, Drogba's Ivory Coast?
Yeah.
That guy's good.
Drogba is really good. So they've got a goal scorer. So they've got a guy who can score goals. And that is in his home continent, Ivory Coast could be a good outside bet. I'm personally kind of interested in following New Zealand. Particularly, my favorite thing about New Zealand is that their nickname is the All Whites, which I really think they want to think about changing before they get on that plane to South Africa.
Do your hemisphere thing.
Oh, the northern and southern hemisphere?
Yeah, people are like that.
Very tough for a northern hemisphere team to win in the southern hemisphere. Very tough for a southern hemisphere team to win in the northern hemisphere. In fact, I think it's only Brazil have ever won the cup in the opposite hemisphere. It is, historically that's been a lot of times because the kind of grass that you play on in the southern hemisphere is a different kind, often more of a sort of Bermuda-type grass and a longer grass, a slower grass. If you watch Mexican soccer, you'll see that they play on longer grass. The ball slows down. It slows the game down. In Europe, they tend to play on very shortcut grass, which is kept very wet, and the ball flashes around very fast over the surface. The interesting thing, and I've been spending a ridiculous amount of time speaking to turf experts, is that this is going to be the first Southern Hemisphere World Cup that's actually building pitches specifically designed to play like Northern Hemisphere grass. It's a blend of artificial turf and real grass that they're using in some of the stadiums. In other stadiums, they're just using a grass type that stays very low. The interesting thing is for the U.S., they can sort of play on both surfaces really well. In some ways, they play like a Northern Hemisphere team with a lot of European influence, but they're very used to playing the slow-down version as well on the sort of slower grasses.
So let's say your hemisphere theory holds.
Yeah.
Other than the Ivory Coast, who has the advantage?
Brazil and Argentina.
Okay. Because you know what? Even though I took AP history and got a 4 in the exam in high school,
you're not quite sure where the hemispheres are.
I couldn't tell you. I don't know what hemisphere I'm in. Am I in north or south?
Right now. Boston, LA. That's the hemisphere you're in.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you. So
no,
you
I think that's good. And then the U.S., Bill, I think the U.S. will be, again, probably the most underrated team at the World Cup.
Wow.
Because worldwide journalists, particularly soccer journalists, they're anti-American deeply, and they can't bring themselves to the idea that the U.S. are any good at soccer. They can't face it.
Now here's what worries me. I know you follow the team. The Charlie Davies thing really hurt because I just didn't feel like they had anybody else quite like him on the team, and it seems like you need one guy of his kind of genre. It seems like every team has one guy like him, and I haven't totally seen anybody else on the team who does the things that he did.
Speed. He can't teach speed.
And they don't have that much speed. It was the one position that they really couldn't afford to lose anybody.
But they do have a guy called Hercules Gomez, which is, I think, arguably my favorite name of any American athlete ever. That's just a fantastic name.
The casual soccer fans think you made that up, and this is all practical
Hercules
joke.
Gomez, number 9. He is just the greatest. It's Hercules spelled with a Z, which I really like.
Then the other thing that worries me, and I'm not saying he can't do it, but man, there's a lot of pressure on Josie Altidore.
Here's the question for the U.S. The U.S. averaged something like, I think the U.S. and Mexico weirdly averaged like, they have trouble scoring goals in a World Cup. They only scored 1 goal in the last World Cup. It's all about goal scoring. And the goals for the U.S. with no real sort of conventional striker with any experience. Landon Donovan, amazingly, is not only the leading goal scorer in the history of U.S. soccer, he's also the leading assist, maker. However, English people like going, "Oh my God, assist maker!" I just said assist maker, but he's the leading assist man in American soccer. And Clint Dempsey is a legitimate goal scorer. He plays in midfield, but he moves up and he plays forward. The American goals are going to come from Dempsey and Donovan. You don't really see where else they're going to come from. Other people might score, but to score enough goals to do well in the tournament, they're going to come from Dempsey and Donovan. How the U.S. do is going to be down to how well Dempsey and Donovan play at the World Cup. Donovan did not play anything like himself at the last 2 World Cups, actually.
But he's grown the most, I think, out of anybody in the American team in the last 18 months to 2 years, it seems.
Without a doubt,
Because he's playing in the Premier League.
Broke up. He's played fantastic football. He went to Everton on a loan and played superbly there for 6 or 7 games this season.
I love that he blamed the marriage for turning his career around. Add that to the Women Are Evil files. Yeah. Tough one for the ex-wife. Explain to our listeners how impressive it was that Donovan went over to the Premier League and actually didn't just play for Everton, but played really well for them.
Well, he played really well for Everton. He played his opening game in sort of history, and this is a guy who, when he played in Germany, for Leverkusen before, had never really sort of made a mark, and he'd come back and he hadn't made their team. And this is, there are not many successful. A lot of goalkeepers have gone over to Europe and done well, but not that many outfield players from America have gone well. John Harkes had a pretty good career early on, but Clint Dempsey at Fulham, definitely an exception. But Landon Donovan went to a much bigger club than Fulham. He went to Everton, who are a big, big club. Opening game is against Arsenal, and and in front of a crowd that were kind of hostile to him at the start of that match. And they warmed to him so quickly, and he was really their best player. Not only played really well, he was their best player during his loan spell.
USA.
The Everton crowd were chanting "USA, USA" every time he ran over to the corner flag to take a corner.
USA England.
Yeah.
Which
an epic game.
Well, it's a wet dream month for ABC because they have the Celtics Lakers finals. And then USA England World Cup. You can't find a better 2-week stretch, I don't think.
It's fantastic. And I must say for this, ESPN have made the smartest decision of hiring Martin Tyler, who is the best commentator in Britain, is coming over to be the lead commentator. And the first game, it's an English guy, the first game he's calling on US television is going to be England-USA. It's going to be really great.
We've gotten a taste of him. He did a game. He did his first game. I forget which one it was, but it was about 6-7 months ago, and it was just. It's like Mike Emmerich with hockey. Like some people are just meant to do play-by-play for a specific sport, and I feel like he's on that.
Yeah, and for years, what ESPN has done is taken on a lot of non-soccer people, and they've put them on and done soccer, and they're great commentators. It's just tough to really feel, soccer and feel what it is. Anyway, I think it's going to be an amazing event. I doubt it will be a good game. I think both teams, it's their first game at the World Cup. I think they're both going to be incredibly nervous. It's at altitude, which is, going to make, 90 minutes of soccer challenging. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game, and I think it's going to be one in midfield. It's going to be a big midfield and probably a central midfield battle, and England, if they're going to win it, they're going to have to outflank the US. They're going to have to get it to their wings. They've got, they're taking 4 pretty good wingers to the World Cup, and they're going to have to use speed and get outside, and they're going to have to get a lot of balls into the box. I think you'll see the U.S. playing more direct and more down the center through Donovan and Dempsey.
Describe how devastating it would be for England to lose to the U.S. in the first game of the World Cup.
Honestly, if we'd lost the Falklands War to Argentina, it would have been easier. Really, that's just what comes to mind. It would have been easier to have lost a war to Argentina than to lose a World Cup game to the U.S. And I know everybody says, it happened in 1950, but no one was alive in 1950.
Yeah.
Certainly no one was watching the World Cup. It wasn't, it just didn't count. Although start counting the number of times that 1950 is mentioned in the build-up to this, the narrative has been set for a long time. But it would be absolutely devastating. England would not recover.
What U.S. sports team would you compare England soccer to?
Do you know what? We were thinking about this earlier. I've got the Lakers and the Celtics.
Because they're tortured, though.
Germany. The Lakers are Brazil, and the Celtics are Germany. Is where I got it. England are just tougher to say.
So some sort of combination of like the Chicago Cubs, the Phoenix Suns, pick, whatever tortured team, because they haven't won in 5 decades, right?
Yes, 66. So it's got to be one of those. It's got to be one of those teams.
So
I'm more tempted to actually say Cleveland, weirdly.
Wow. Oh, the Cleveland fans are so excited.
Only because, Rooney, I do believe that LeBron is the best player in the world, and I'm not saying Rooney is the best player in the world, but he's the best player England have ever sent to the World Cup.
Huh.
And so it's going to be partly about Rooney, but Rooney's going to need support. He's going to need support. And England's role players, their defenders, their midfield players are going to have to really gel.
You know what? I like the Cleveland analogy. Here's why. Well, 2 reasons. The 1966, that jibes perfectly with Cleveland, because Cleveland was 1964. Jim Brown retires. They never win again. And then also, soccer in England is basically every sport for a U.S. city. So the Browns, the Cavaliers, and the Indians combined are what soccer means to England, but for Cleveland. And they've been so tortured by those 3 teams, and it sounds, from what I've read and heard, like it sounds like soccer's had that kind of torturous effect in England.
Knowing a few Cleveland fans, Cleveland fans are always fatalists. They never believe their team are going to make it, and that's what the English press are already writing the stories, when England lose to the U.S. in their opening game.
So you would say that the England fans, like the Cleveland fans, assume that the worst possible thing is going to happen at the worst possible time?
Yes. I would say a good proportion of the England fans intelligent enough to know believe that it's inevitable that England will lose the World Cup. Unfortunately, I'm a bit stupid, and I think that England just might win it because their players are at the right age.
But that's when it gets great, though, is because the great thing about a tortured franchise in American sports, that the ones that really have the effect on their fan bases are the ones that, even though there's this history that says, look, we're going to screw you over, it's going to happen, the fans still talk themselves into it anyway, and then the fatalism kicks in at some point, and they feel like idiots.
No. I think that's pretty accurate. I've got some other sporting analogies of America. New Zealand and Slovakia, which to me, I always try and figure out the worst game in the World Cup, and it will be on Tuesday, June 15th, when New Zealand plays Slovakia. And they're like the Yakima Sun Kings and the Quad City Thunder of the World Cup. That's who they are. I'm not even sure those are real teams, but I think I remember from following players in the CBA who I was looking for 10-day contracts with the Orlando Magic and seeing those were real teams.
Argentina's 7-1 to win. Brazil's plus 450, so 9-2. England's 6-1. And where's Germany? Germany is 14-1. Seems a little high. But here's Spain's 4-1.
Also worth looking at.
Spain's 4-1, but here's the one that you mentioned earlier. It seems like an interesting long shot bet. Ivory Coast, 33-1.
Ivory Coast are this, according to the Soccer Power Index, which is actually much better than the FIFA rankings. because the power index takes into account, like, friendlies and how the players play on their club teams and things like that. They have, the Ivory Coast at 16, and there are, at least, 2 teams above them who aren't even in the World Cup. They're right there with, France and Italy. But by the way, the United States are at 15 too.
For what?
At the United States, I've got to, this is what drives, players who've played against this U.S. team. I remember during the last World Cup, some of the Italians saying this, is that the U.S. team aren't good enough to win the World Cup. However, American athletes never believe that they're not good enough to win. Their sense belief, they're going to be incredibly fit, and I'm telling you, I think they're getting out of that group. And once you go into the last 16, anything can happen. Do I really see them being able to, through 7 games, to be able to, win 4, draw 3, which is probably, or win 5, draw 2, which is probably going to be the minimum they're going to have to do? Tough to see them going there, played 7, won 5, drawn 2. But, I feel like they could shock and go to the semis.
Algeria, England, Slovenia, United States, Group C. I would be disappointed if they didn't get out of that group. I gotta be
Algeria
honest.
will be tough.
We have
because
6.
They're just going to be acclimatized, and they're going to be really annoying and really professional. Who are the most difficult, like, defensive team to go and beat? Like the Charlotte Bobcats, Algeria. You like that?
No. I would have gone with the Celtics. Celtics have the best defense.
The Celtics, I've already told you, are Germany.
Yeah, you're right.
It's like the Lakers and the Celtics. It's like the 11 of the last 13 World Cups. It's Brazil and Germany. It's the Celtics and the Lakers.
Quickly, you are a diehard Orlando Magic fan, which I think is hysterically funny. Vince Carter, have you seen enough?
Well, do you know what? I so much wanted Vince to be good, just so that I could rip out the pages in your book and send them back to you.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen enough, and like JJ Redick was really the story for the Orlando Magic in the postseason. Like, he played his little socks off.
Yeah.
And was on your podcast. I'm
like
sure after how well he played in one of those games, you were never going to have him back on.
I was mad. I felt like I gave him the confidence or something.
No, look, I've been an Orlando fan. This is like, I was there. I moved to America, moved to Orlando, Florida. I was there the first night they played their first ever game in the NBA against the Detroit Pistons. I've been through the Mark Akers, Sidney Green, Sam Vincent years with that team. But at the same time, I know enough about sport to know that there are some very good athletes on that team. There are some very good shooters. But in the playoffs, I think what I'm learning a bit about basketball, and maybe this is the good analogy to soccer, is that the best basketball players tend to win, not the best athletes and not the best shooters. You've got to be a really good basketball player. And that team, actually, their best basketball player, like all around, like knowledge of the game, sees it, can feed the post, can shoot, can pass, can do everything, is probably, weirdly, J.J. Redick and Jameer Nelson. But, they don't have enough basketball players on that team.
Well, and also, I didn't think they had enough fighters in that team. And, the only guys that seemed to me totally unafraid in that series were Redick. The last 3 games, Dwight Howard. I actually thought he showed up for the last 3, but I don't know where he was in the first 3. And Jameer Nelson definitely has the confidence. I just don't think he's really that good. He kind of maximizes what he has, but what he has is he's a 5'11" guy.
I love that.
Yeah.
He's like the Tim Henman of...
Right.
I've always said Tim Henman overachieved as a tennis player. Jameer Nelson has overachieved as a point guard.
If he's your first, second, or third best player, you're probably not going to the title. You're not. That's not going to be the decider.
My favorite player on the Orlando Magic, though, is Michael Petras, because I actually believe that he is insane.
He might be.
I know that he has the same, he gets as excited making a shot when he's 25 points down as when he's 25 points ahead, or whether it's a game-tying shot. He is he's great. He is just insane.
Do you like Dwight Howard?
I think he's a remarkable athlete, and when he plays like he did in, Game 4 and Game 5, I like him a lot. I'm just, I think he's he doesn't really strike me as a great basketball player. He strikes me as a great athlete.
It's a great point. And I would also throw in, I thought the most interesting thing in the whole series to me was the Celtics were kind of blown them out in the second half of Game 6, and the crowd got on Howard a little bit, and it fired him up, and he unleashed like a minute of really great basketball. And that made me think, you really shouldn't take the opposing crowd to bring out a good minute of basketball for you. You know
what I think? Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. You know what I wish, though, that the NBA would import from the World Cup?
What?
The third place game.
The professional athletes, the agents would never go for it.
I think the third place game, like a little 3-game series between Orlando and Phoenix right now, I think you could run that as a pre-show. You could run it on Kimmel. That would do a number.
Hey, speaking of TV, you're bringing back Pyramid.
Bringing back the Pyramid.
Your real credentials are you've done a ton of TV. Most famously, you created Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Which,
I didn't create it, but I produced the American version of that. Brought it to America.
Okay, same thing. Well, not same thing, but yeah, you brought it to America and it became a smash hit, and you didn't make quite enough money to buy the Orlando Magic, so you need one more hit show.
No, I'm still looking at the Yakima Sun Kings.
Pyramid was a show that I grew up with that I absolutely loved to pieces, and you're bringing that back.
I honestly believe that Pyramid is the greatest game show in the history of American television. I think it's the best game ever invented. And so we're bringing it back. We just announced that Andy Richter is going to be the host.
Ooh, see, how are you going to teach Andy the whole... Dick Clark had that great condescending thing when they'd screw up the final pyramid, the final 6 clues, and he'd come in, and instead of just telling them what the answer was, he'd have to, watch this, I'm a pro, I'll be able to solve this for you and give the perfect clue. And it always bothered me as a kid.
That's actually, because you said that to me at dinner before I even had Andy, that's why I gave Andy the job. Because he looked at Pyramid in exactly the same way. This guy won Celebrity Jeopardy. He's no slouch. He beat Wolf Blitzer.
Good. Yeah, I need arrogance from my Pyramid host.
Yeah, you've had that from a few. Did Donnie have that in Donnie Mid, the most recent version of that? I'm not sure.
Did not watch that.
But I think Andy is a really good game player, and that's like he's very smart. He's very good at playing games, which is why I think he'll be good. But I have the greatest respect for that show. We're not changing a single rule. We're playing it exactly the same way. We're just going to stage it in a more modern way. But so during the World Cup, I'm doing this whole thing for ESPN. It's official now. We're building this whole blog thing. So
Perfect.
It's going to be several links away from you, called Off the Ball with Roger Bennett, who's another guy who writes a lot on ESPN.com. And so all the time when I'm doing this daily blog about the World Cup, I'm going to be doing Pyramid. So I'm going to be weaving in Pyramid and the World Cup together through the whole thing.
Well, I have another announcement for you that you don't know about.
Okay.
You're coming on the podcast every week during the World Cup.
Yes. That's fantastic. Thanks, Bill.
And I'm going to offer you $0.00 as your reward.
That's okay. It's like no consolation prize.
You know what? One last thing about Pyramid, and this is I don't think people realize how important game shows were from the 1975 to 1985 stretch, because we didn't have reality TV back then. We also didn't have a lot of channels. And now a lot of these people that hit it big once on shows and then you never see them again, they end up on Celebrity Rehab, or they are able to have the second life of a career, Celebrity Apprentice, all these different shows, and they never leave. But when I was growing up, it was game shows that these people ended up on. And you'd be like, oh, whatever happened to Bull from Night Court? Oh, he's on a game show, And that's just the way it went. And that's the part that I'll be interested to see if you can recreate on the updated Pyramid. Okay. Is whether I feel like that kind of glee and excitement and the unintentional comedy of these people that from that era that, oh man, they're on Pyramid the whole week. They obviously don't have a job anymore. You can't do that in this era. You have to actually get real celebrities that have stuff going.
Although, look, yeah, you're remembering a lot of the people on Pyramid, but also Billy Crystal was on Pyramid, David Letterman was on Pyramid. Some really big people were on that show in the 70s and early 80s.
In the 70s. In the 80s, it tailed off. In the 70s, it was...
on the John Davidson Pyramid, it tailed off?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Letterman is on YouTube, and it's actually kind of fantastic. Last thing, your company produced the I Scored a Goal shorts that we ran at Tribeca, and then also... I think we're going to run them on the network and on SportsCenter and stuff like that.
I saw one on SportsCenter, and I'm seeing them in interstitials all over.
Yeah, but they're on ESPN.com, all of them, and I've recommended them. I recommend them on Twitter this weekend. I've recommended them to friends.
Thanks.
people love them. I mean, they're just great, and I really hope that people go and check them out.
You know, I scored a goal. It's a credit to the company Passion Pictures and amazing producer John Batasek and director Dan Gordon who did them. But, you know, it's great. There are 35 men alive who scored a goal in the World Cup final. Not very many, and we've made a film with practically all of them who would do it for the money. And they're really good. You know, they're really good films. They're big moments. You know, I don't know. There aren't that many moments in sport, worldwide sport, as big as scoring a goal in the World Cup final.
Yeah, especially the every 4 years thing. Although I told you at dinner, I think they should move the World Cup to every 3 years. And I feel the same about the Olympics. 4 years it's almost too long. We can do this every 3 years and it would have the same drama and impact, I think.
No, I agree, and I think that it's something that they think about all the time. I think they've been very tempted to sort of play it more often.
Well, I think when you think about an athlete's prime,
yeah.
You know, you might catch one of the best soccer players ever, and I personally think that athletes peak for 3 years, and you want to catch, you want to be at the highest level you could be of competition at some point in those 3 years. There's a chance that we could hit a soccer player that doesn't peak during the right 2 World Cups. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. By the way, I think that has that might be true. I was looking at the ages of Donovan and Dempsey today. They're like 27 and 28, the other way around. And they, you know, that might be just like a year or two out of prime for a World Cup.
Yeah.
They're probably more there like when they're 29 and 30 to peak in a World Cup. And so this is maybe going to be their last shot.
Well, my favorite player ever, Larry Bird, his peak was 85, 86, 87. He won the MVP in 84, but wasn't really at the peak of his powers yet. And, you know, if that had been translated to soccer, he doesn't peak in a World Cup at his absolute apex, which is interesting. Anyway, all right, come back when the World Cup starts. Please come back, and we'll have you on again, and we could do it all over again. And I can't wait to see how this USA-England game turns out. I mean, it's really going to be one of the coolest sporting events.
That's a big one.
Michael Davies, thank you very much.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.